Howdy folks, welcome back to the vlog. It is me, the Tank Commander again, and if you guys are seeing this, we are just 2 days away from the 2020 cruise. Is that not exciting? 2 days. Now before we get on with the video, I just want to let you guys know that, as I said before, the last 2 videos I'm going to be making my decision of what's going to be in the next videos. So if you guys remember the choices, you'll be able to know. Now, for this cruise, I just want to say, for any of you who watched my cruise vlog from 2018, I'm not going to be making it anywhere near as long, okay? I'm going to be doing my best to get as many good shots as I can, but I also want to let you guys know I'm not going overboard this time. Anyway, we're going to continue on with the video today, and we are finishing up with the second last part to the most useless, pathetic, and obsolete tanks of World War II. So, what are we going to be doing today? Well, I got our choice right here. Are you ready? Oh yeah. This is what we're doing today, folks. Now, many of you out there who are not tank fanatics like I am, you're probably wondering, that looks awfully similar to the Jagdtiger that I showed you guys earlier. Well, you'd be absolutely incorrect. World of Tanks players, let's hear it. What is this tank? I'm not sure if any of us heard them, but ladies and gentlemen, this is our choice for today. This is known as the Ferdinand, or Elephant, which was a German heavy Panzerjäger, or tank hunter. So, a little background first. During the race to create heavy tanks, there were 2 main competitors that wanted to build a tank for Hitler. Those were Henschel and his old friend, Dr. Ferdinand Porsche. Henschel produced a more conventional style tank with a regular petrol engine. Porsche decided to do one with a unique suspension system and have even thicker armor at the front, and have an unusual water-cooled engine. Sadly, the Porsche design failed, and Henschel got the award for the contract. So, now Porsche had all these spare, what were known as Tiger P hulls, and they couldn't figure out what they were going to do with them. So what he decided was, he was going to develop a new heavy tank destroyer, and he decided to put it on that chassis. So, what they did was, as you can see, this is the Porsche suspension here, alright? It's torsion bar suspension, and not double torsion bar like the regular Tiger. In order to turn these tanks into the Ferdinand, what they had to do was they had to move the engine from the back to the front. Now this effectively cut off the driver and assistant driver while moving, or in combat, because they were separated. And they put the fighting compartment inside a huge armored casemate on the back. And of course, in the place of it, they mounted a massive 88mm KWK 42/3 L71 88mm gun. Now, many of you probably don't know, but if you've played Call of Duty with the World Wars, it shows up in the Kursk mission of that. So now, you're probably wondering what the engine is. Well, the engine is an HL230, how do you explain it? Or excuse me, it's an HL120 Maybach TRM 596 horsepower petrol engine. Now, unfortunately, for such a heavy tank, because this tank weighed 71.65 tons, or 65 metric tons. The issue for this tank was the armor was so thick, okay? It was 200 millimeters on the front, 80 millimeters on the side, and 80 millimeters on the rear. Now, on the front, World of Tanks players know this, These two little cheeks you see here, those are weak. Those are only 80 millimeters thick. So what happened was this was built in preparation for what was known as Operation Citadel, or Operation Citadel, which was what was going to turn into the Battle of Kursk in June of 1943. Well, so what happened was they wanted a bunch of these to go into battle. Only 88 of them ever made it into service, and all 88 of them were committed to the battle. Now, when the battle commenced and these things started rolling across the Russian steppe, now steppe is a definition for like open plain. The problem was, because of their engines and because of their weight, they could only reach a top speed of 30 kilometers an hour or 19 miles an hour, which was pretty upsetting. But the problem was, this thing was just so slow. Now, the main reason why these things... Now, I'll tell you this. These things actually had an interestingly good track record at Kursk. Supposedly, according to the sources, it was one Ferdinand knocked out per 25 Russian tanks knocked out. And I'll explain why that was. The main tank that they had to face was this, the Russian T-34-76. Now, this is an early model. This is the 1940 model. They also had the 1943 model by then. But the thing was, the 76.2 millimeter F-32 gun, the F-34 gun, could not penetrate this thing's armor, the frontal armor at all. But if the tank got to the side and fired at it that way, it could penetrate it at close range. Another tank that it had to face there was the KV-1 heavy tank, the Clemente Voroshilov. It, with its 76.2 millimeter gun, now this thing did have thicker armor than the T-34, but still, this thing still could not penetrate the thing's armor, and this thing was a lot slower. Also at the battle, now it was a little bit rarer to see by that time, was this beast. Oh yeah, KV-2, comrade. This thing has a 152 millimeter howitzer on it. Now, the high explosive damage that this thing can deal to a Ferdinand would be substantial, because even if it smacked this thing on the front of the casemate, that fragmentation would basically end up going down into the engine. But still, this is the long 88 millimeter L-71 that would soon be put on the King Tiger. This thing could knock this thing out at a substantial range. So, what was the problem with this thing? Well, the problem was at Kursk, these things just basically went out ahead and just started breaking through the Russian lines. But the main problem was, these things would get swarmed by infantry. And the problem was, it did not have a machine gun on the front. Now, this is a later version. This is the Elephant, which has that remedy there. But one thing that the Germans also tried to do was create a weapon system that would be able to defend the Ferdinands. And this was a little attachment to the Sturmgewehr StG-44, or StG-44, which was the world's first assault rifle. And they came up with what was known as a Krummlauf, which was a curved tube on the end of the barrel that they would be able to stick up out of the hatches and shoot the enemy infantry off as they were climbing up. Problem was with that weapon, because of the 90-degree turn, the bullets couldn't handle the stress, and it basically became what was known as a shotgun effect, which basically means the bullet turned into fragments. Now, technically, to close-range combat, that would seem a little bit more effective. Anyway, we're getting off topic here. Another issue was Russians had a nasty habit of sabotage, okay? So they completely laid minefields everywhere, and these things, if they get stuck in a minefield, they're basically sitting ducks for Russian artillery. And if you see pictures from the Eastern Front, one of these that was hit by artillery had its ammunition explode, and this casemate blasted up, turned upside down, and landed back on the tank upside down. And the other reason was because from one German tank destroyer commander, okay, now I should have you know, one of my ancestors served in the Battle of Kursk as the commander of a Sturmgeschütz 3 assault gun. One of these tank commanders said that they were waiting for the Ferdinands to come up the hill, but the problem was their engines just overheated. So basically they were put out of action because of mechanical trouble. That's why I said this engine was extremely overstressed for a vehicle this weight. So what happened was 88 of these went to Kursk, half of them were lost in combat. So what they decided to do was, after the battle had failed, they took the remaining 44 of these back to Germany, and they decided to upgrade them to the Elefant, which had the machine gun on the front. And what this was they were going to prepare for the Allied invasion of Italy at Anzio, and this was going to be against the Americans. Now, you may think it would have had an easy time against the Russian T-34s. Well, it would have an even easier time against the M4 Sherman. And these things were committed to that. I think a battalion of 12 of them were committed to the battle. It's highly disputed about what the record of these were, but it really still didn't stop the invasion. Furthermore, when they were sent into action, one of them was disabled. Now, if you've seen the show Tank Overhaul, they overhaul this thing. But the problem is, when they take the right rear suspension out, they discover there's a part of a shell wedged in there. Because what they discovered was it was hit by a round from a 76.2 millimeter anti-tank gun. Now, the reports are still disputed. They don't know if it was a 76.2 millimeter anti-tank gun, or if it was an M4A2 Sherman with the 76.2 millimeter gun, or if it was, say, from an M10 Wolverine tank destroyer or an M18 Hellcat tank destroyer. It's still disputed to this day. But the problem was, as we continue to fight further north, these things just fell back, except the one that was disabled at Anzio. Now, before we get to anything, I should just have you know, the one at Anzio is situated now at the U.S. Army Ordnance Museum in Fort Lee, Virginia. And there's only one other Ferdinand besides that, which is a Ferdinand. This one is an Elefant, the later version. That one is at the Kubinka Tank Museum in Moscow, and that was captured at Kursk. But that's not the end of the story for the Ferdinand and the Elefant. Okay, by this time, they were the Elefant, period. The story does not end there. Because on the Eastern Front, as the Germans began retreating from the Russian onslaught, this thing was going to see action in the defense of the Reich. But by this time, it was facing even heavier opponents, okay? By this time, they had the Russian T-34-85 coming out in substantial numbers, and you'd be seeing waves of these things launched against the Germans. But still, this thing could not penetrate its frontal armor. However, there was a tank that could. And that's this beast. This is the Russian Joseph Stalin, the IS-2. And this thing has a 122 millimeter gun on it. This thing can penetrate that frontal armor at substantial ranges. And the L-71 for this had to get in with a certain range to be able to penetrate this thing with 120 millimeters of sloped frontal armor. Also, there was another tank that this thing had to deal with, or should I say assault gun. That was this. This is the ISU-152 with a 152 millimeter gun howitzer on it. By this time, these assault guns, you have to remember, the SU-152, its predecessor, was developed to be a heavy assault gun to take on infantry assaults. But if it had to face a Tiger tank, it would. Well, after Kursk, these tank destroyers and assault guns were developed more to take on heavy armor. And like I said, with a 152mm gun, this thing was going to receive substantial damage even if a round does not penetrate. But still, the story of that does not end there. If you look on the YouTube channel called Mark Felton Productions, okay, I will leave the decision to you to look it up, but believe it or not, the last of these tanks were used in the Battle of Berlin. Believe that or not, as many people would think that it did not survive the war, it lasted all the way until the end in Berlin. Their 88mm guns, they're basically put into like casemate positions at the end of streets, and they would just fire down these streets at enemy tanks as they came. And basically, they were just put in place as gun bunkers and pillboxes. So, basically, how I'd like to put this. So, what out of the three choices? Useless, pathetic, or obsolete? Useless? No. Because it was used to its effect, but its mechanical problems proved to be troublesome for it. Obsolete? Semi. I mean, it was built on an obsolete chassis that failed trials, but it was still able to be used in defensive operations. Pathetic? In a way, yes. Now, I am a World of Tanks Blitz player. I play against the Ferdinand, and I hope to be getting it soon. So, in real life, this thing was pathetic, because in its uses, the thing was, it was Hitler's megalomaniac mind that led to this again, and had they done more research and done few more improvements on this, I'm sure this tank would have been able to see a lot better service. In World of Tanks, heck, it's an interesting tank to face. But that's how it was with the story of this vehicle, because, like I said, trying to go bigger and bigger does not always help. You have to think about that. So, that ends the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And tomorrow we got the last one coming, so stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoy this special, which is going to have the last vote choice of this series. So, this is the Tank Commander signing off, and I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy.